your host, Professor Corey Nimbright, coming to you live from the studios of the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation in Accra. We come to you live this and every Sunday with issues of national and engage you in discussions for informed decision making. We are streaming live on GBC Ghana Online, on Facebook at Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, and as always, we welcome those who are listening to us on Unique 95.7. Last week, the President of the Republic launched the National Education Consultative Forum. The forum brought together a broad range of stakeholders from policymakers, educators, faith-based organizations, and also the public sector. At the heart of the President's message was a call for collective action to reform Ghana's education system. But what does meaningful reform look like? And how do we balance access, quality, and innovation while ensuring that no child is left behind? Tonight, we engage our panelists on key focus areas of the forum with a goal to answering the following two questions. Are we on the right path to transforming Ghana's education system, and what actionable steps ought to follow? We encourage you to send messages during the show to our WhatsApp number 020-380-3174. And as always, we ask that you kindly include your name on the messages that you send to us. With me in the studio for tonight's discussion on my far left is Professor George K.T. Oduro. He's a technical advisor to the Minister of Education and also the chairman of the Education Forum Planning Committee. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you too.
And my immediate left is Dr. Andrews Akwa, Research Fellow, National Center for Research into Basic Education, University of Education, Winneba. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you very much.
So, Prof, if I can start with you, what I wanted to do was read a section of the President's speech at the forum. And he said, today we begin an important journey of consensus building in an important sector, education. For many years, we've watched education standards decline significantly. We have individually and collectively expressed our views on how we believe the education sector's problem can be addressed. What we have lacked, however, is a unified platform on which the various shades of opinion and perspectives can be combined and distilled to yield the most optimal outcomes for our children. So you have the arduous task, you and your 8-member committee, of actually putting this whole forum together. And my question for you is, how challenging was it for you and your committee to bring all these stakeholders together, not just bring them together, but to make sure that whatever contribution they were making was going to be meaningful in terms of what the goals and objectives were?
Thank you very much. Greetings to our audience and my team members. I greet them as well. Arduous, yes. A very Herculean task, because we're given a very short time to plan. And looking at the duration that we have to work day and night to ensure that we are able to get His Excellency the President launch the program. So the launch of the program rightly came on in the Volta region, who specifically on the 19th. Now, what the committee did was first to identify a theme for the engagement. We did this by looking at the 2018-2030 strategic plan, and then looking at the NDC manifesto, and we also tapped ideas from some experienced people. So looking at all these, we decided to operate within the theme transforming education for a sustainable future. And to trigger discussions and frame the discussions well, we decided on 5 pillars. The first pillar looked at infrastructure, because that had been one of the challenges that we had seen across all levels of the education system, and especially at the basic level. As at the time we were interrogating, we realized that there were still close to 5,000 schools still operating under trees. So infrastructure was a very key issue. So our concern was on physical infrastructure as well as technology, because now we are in the technology era and students are expected to learn through technology. How prepared are we? How can we ensure that the use of technology is improved to aid learning, to aid teaching? So that's one the first pillar. The second pillar looked at quality education provision. We realize that when we talk about access, we realize that, well, as for access, Ghana has done well, even though there are still challenges. Across the sub-region, access, no challenge, Ghana has done well. But when it came to quality and equity, we found challenge there.
Okay.
And so we made that the second pillar.
Okay.
Now, under this pillar, we're looking at basic education, secondary education, including TVET, and then tertiary education. Then we're looking at issues relating to curriculum, issues relating to inclusivity, and all those things that go into help the learner to learn well. Then the next one was pillar is regulation, accountability, and governance.
Okay.
Now, we arrived at this pillar because we realized that if institutions are not regulated to perform within the context of their mandate, if institutions are not regulated to comply with standards of creating the necessary environment for students to learn, for pupils to learn, we cannot achieve quality. Accountability, because we realize that it is very, very important for teachers to be accountable to themselves and to the society, for pupils, students to be accountable to themselves and to the institutions and society, and then for heads of schools to be accountable to themselves and to the taxpayer. So we made that the third pillar for the discussion. The other one we looked at was education financing, because as the saying goes, the beauty of the bird depends on its feather. Okay, and without money it's difficult to push things. But how do we ensure that we diversify sources of finance to push education, to implement educational policies that we have? So that is the fourth pillar. Then the last pillar, which is the fifth pillar, is research and data.
Okay.
Because we are in the 21st century and evidence plays a very key role. Without evidence, policy making and policy implementation becomes very challenging. And so we decided that the fifth pillar should be research and data. So in all, the theme is transforming education for a sustainable future. Okay. And to delve deeply into this, to guide stakeholders, to interrogate this theme, we had pillars around infrastructure, quality education provision, regulation, accountability, and governance, education financing, and then research.
Okay.
Data.
All right.
Then one of the things that we also did was that we did not just make the forum a one-slot thing. We thought, apart from bringing people to 2 days, we needed to get down. And so we've divided the country into 3 zones. We have the northern zone, the middle zone, and then the southern zone. And in each of these, we have parallel sessions. The southern zone completed its engagement last Friday, to the 1st, and we had a parallel one at Accra and then Cape Coast.
Okay.
We had already done that of the Volta region, which comprised Volta and Uti regions. As I speak now, tomorrow, there will be one in Sunyani and Tamale. Then on 26th, we'll have one in Bolga and Kumasi.
Okay.
We didn't, let me just add them.
Okay.
Then we have also some targeted groups, students. When we met in Ho, we realized that student voice was very important. So tomorrow we are engaging the National Union of Ghana Students. On 26th, we are engaging all religious groups.
Okay.
So this is what we have done so far.
Okay,
Yes.
so that allowed you to have
Allowed us, yeah.
Okay, so Dr. Akwa, I know you've written a very interesting article on the reforms in education. So what were your thoughts when you saw what President Mahama had initiated and some of what Professor Drew just mentioned in terms of the outlook and what they are hoping to do?
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity, and let me say that initially our thought was to look at how education can be sustained, and rightly, like Prof said, the theme has to do with transforming education for a sustainable future. In that regard, I think the theme and the various pillars were directly in line with the things we looked at as far as the article was concerned.
What were some of your findings initially in that article?
You mean the article?
Yes.
Yeah, so in the article, we decided to look at some areas or some dimensions upon which policy evaluation can be subjected to. So the first one was effectiveness, efficiency, adequacy, equity, responsiveness, and appropriateness. And in all of that, we came to realize that as we discussed, we realized that the free SHS was in one way or the other lacking all these dimensions because of the prevailing challenges. And so if the free SHS or education in particular in the country can be sustainable to help us transform the socioeconomic or the political dimension of our country, then we need to look at it from these areas. And rightly, like Prof has mentioned, I am very glad that the current president is not trying to politicize the free SHS, because politicization comes in when they begin to place judgment here and there. But you could see that once he took office, he has a lay down plan, and the lay down plan is being implemented to make sure that at the end of the day, we achieve that type of education which is sustainable, which is in a way going to transform the socioeconomic lives of our good citizens of Ghana.
Yeah, this goes beyond free SHS though. This is looking at the entire education system. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. Initially, thinking about the free SHS, but His Excellency, the President, thought that, look, when we're talking about education, it's in a chain of activities. So if you concentrate on one aspect of the chain, the level of the chain, you do not do any good to the levels. Yeah. And we realized that basic education was very, very important. If you don't lay a very strong foundation on the basic level, like any building, if the superstructure is weak, no matter how beautiful it is, it will last. Yeah, so because of this, His Excellency the President said, look, let's look at the education level in its entirety. Look at basic, look at secondary, look at tertiary, and other forms of it. So that is it.
Okay. So one of the things that the President said, which is in line with what you both indicated, he said education must remain a tool for empowerment, equality, and transformation in Ghana. It is also an important instrument for social mobility. Education must inspire hope and deliver opportunity for all, whether you're born in Accra or the most remote parts of our nation. Which brings me to, what the President had posed 5 questions when he came to the launch. So I wanted to ask, when we're talking about ensuring quality education for every child, what do you think are the largest or the biggest barriers to helping us accomplish that? I know you mentioned earlier that people were there are still 5,000 students being taught, 5,000 communities or 5,000 students?
5,000 schools under trees.
Schools under trees. Yes. I don't know if that's the biggest challenge, but what is it? I'll ask you also, Dr. Akwa. But what do you think?
As for the biggest, and we all are aware, we say money. Money is the biggest of it. But putting money aside, I think the biggest challenge we have in this country, so far as education is concerned, is what my doc said. The partisanization or politicization of educational policies. When the free SHS was introduced in 2017, if there hadn't been political tag on that initiative, laudable as it was. And I remember that I was one person who came out strongly cautioning that government should not rush in implementing that. Stakeholders should be engaged. So we clearly define the implementation strategy. I remember saying that parents should be made to understand what the free means, whether they have any role to it. And I was lambasted and lampooned. and I said this, that from 2017 to 2024, because of the contrasting opinion I expressed, I was isolated from all national discourses on education in this country. You know, so partisanization for me is the greatest barrier.
Okay.
You know, because of partisanization and the desire to satisfy political interest rather than national interest, we've not been able to identify the real challenges on the ground so as to put intervention to address them. And so we create the impression that all is well, when in reality the poor, the disadvantaged is suffering. So that's the biggest thing I'll talk about, apart from money.
Okay, what about you, Dr. Akwa? What do you think is the biggest challenge that confronts?
Okay, for me now, the biggest challenge I'm seeing is overcrowding. We are seeing that the students are gaining admission. A lot of the students, the numbers are huge, but they get the admission, they go to the schools, and the classrooms are limited. The other infrastructure, that is the physical infrastructure, are also limited. So you see that they are not able to really get the teacher to student ratio very well. So it is also affecting
the quality.
Yes,
okay.
the teacher student ratio, and then overall there is a need to make sure that, just like Prof mentioned, we need to tackle it from these 5 pillars, looking at the infrastructure, and if the need be, in order to solve the problem with overcrowding, we can involve the private senior high schools.
Okay. So as we look at the issues in education, we also have disparities in terms of the learning outcomes and how the children are being taught. So looking at government policies and local initiatives, how can we bridge that gap in terms of the education disparities? Because we can talk about quality of education, but many times it's the delivery that forms the major part of the quality that we are talking about.
That's why we've made a second pillar of this stakeholder engagement, focusing on quality education provision. Because if we take pride in access expansion without thinking about equity, looking at the rural, urban divides, without looking at the poor, the disadvantaged, and then the advantage, who at the end of the day write the same exams though. So in schools, you get to certain schools where even ICT, they do not have the equipment. They have to improvise to teach, and yet at the end of the day, they write the same exams without improvised materials. So the inequity is so. I think one way by which we can address this issue is to set our priorities right. Know what we need as a nation, what human capital do we need to support our development, how does the education we provide fit into our national development plan. When we are able to define this and set our priorities right, then we'll be addressing the issues that we're talking about.
Okay.
You know, that's one way of doing it.
Okay. So, and Dr. Akwa, as I mentioned earlier, the president had mentioned 5 things, 5 questions actually that he posed. One had to do with the quality of education. The other was equipping teachers for success. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, for me, I think equipping teachers for success is very, very important. In the University of Education where I am, I'm working with the Institute for Educational Research and Innovation Studies, and one of our mandates is to build capacity of teachers. So some time ago, we were rolling out some models from NTC, and we're going out there and making sure that we facilitate their continuous professional development training programs. And I saw that whilst we were giving them those models, some of the teachers didn't even know certain things like portfolio development. And building your portfolio as a teacher is very important. It makes you, or it helps you to be able to track your works you've been doing and all of that. There was another model too we came up with, which is emotional intelligence and essential soft skills for teachers. And we realized that yes, some of the teachers have heard about emotional intelligence and all of that, but they have not really given themselves the permission to read and get to know the various or the subcomponents and the soft skills they need to get as far as their teaching and learning is concerned. So I think the government of Ghana, and I'm very glad that right from inception, he has not put away this thing of capacity building training for teachers. It is still there, and I think about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I heard that the government of Ghana is renewing the teacher licenses for all the teachers, and that is going to help them to be able to get new licenses, get their new license numbers, and then when they get themselves involved into the continuous professional development training programs, they are giving some points, and that is going to make them serious, because if you are going in there for a training, at the end of the day you are going to get a point. You will not sit back in the house and say that, oh, it's nothing. And on top of it, the government of Ghana has also been giving them allowances. So it means that the government of Ghana, under John Dramani Mahama, or under His Excellency Akufo-Addo, have been doing so well in building the capacity of teachers.
Okay.
And I'm very happy that this new administration is continuing in that regard.
Okay. But what about you? What are your...
Yeah, it all starts with the teacher. If we do not prepare the teacher well, if the teacher is not helped to get or internalize the content, if the teacher is not helped to get the teaching methodology right, if the teacher is not helped to understand the skills and apply that to the classroom right, and therefore if the teacher is not helped to realize that an enabling environment in the classroom facilitates learning, then we will not achieve it. My big question I've been asking myself is, you and I attended school, were taught by teachers. I didn't get the opportunity of enjoying a secondary school education. But I was taught by a teacher at the middle school level. The classroom, we had sufficient textbooks. The teacher was well equipped, and so he taught us. And the quality that I got at the middle school level, that is what has propelled me to become a professor. So it is not just enough pushing people through the teacher training college. And one challenge I have seen with the current, teachers, is that because the free SHS aimed at access and people going through quantity and others, a number of people who enter the colleges of education by virtue of the results they have. Yes, on paper they have very good grades and all this, but in reality are not materials for the colleges. And that's what I've always been arguing, that it isn't the licentiate exams that will make the teacher an efficient teacher. It is the entry point. What type of people do we admit, enroll? So that is one place we have to look at. Then secondly, it is not enough preparing teachers to come and sending them to the classroom to teach. The strength of a soldier lies in his weapon. If the soldier doesn't have a weapon, he cannot. The same way, no matter the effectiveness of a teacher, if he or she gets to the classroom without the necessary equipment with which we facilitate learning, nothing can be attained. And so these are things that His Excellency, the President, wants the stakeholders to critically look at. In fact, one of the things he said repeatedly was especially teachers who get to the rural areas to teach. This plan has been on the books for a very long time, where certain percentage of money should be paid to them, which is not that. His Excellency says that he will ensure that happens. Okay. So these are some of the things that we
So let me stay with you, Professor Drew. As you listen, because I'm sure it's going to take a while to really get the report together to share with His Excellency the President before we get to know what is going on. But was there anything during the whole forum process that surprised you? Was there any submission that was novel, any ideas that came out that was really unique in terms of thought process?
We had two external speakers, keynote speakers, one Professor Agbenyega, and then one Professor Achampong. Agbenyega from Australia and Achampong from the UK. They are both Ghanaians living outside. It does appear, I don't know if they consulted each other. But one of the things that came across them is, if we want a sustainable educational system, then we must be objective in our plans. And I think that is one thing that makes a difference. That without objectivity, we'll make the plans, but the plans will only satisfy a certain
mindset.
And it meant a lot to me because I think Ghana, our biggest problem is that we make policies that satisfy political regime, but not the nation. So free SHS, for instance, I remember our secretary said, look, if we don't do it, they will say we cannot do it. So within that time, we have to do it. And I think that is one thing that keeps ringing in my mind, objectivity.
So Dr. Akwa, you mentioned earlier something about the private sector, you know, in terms of coming together. What partnerships can the private sector and tech organizations actually come together to bring to the table to enhance our education process? Because when we talk about the remote areas, I mean, I don't know if technology or digital learning can help in any way, shape, or form, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, so for me, if you ask me, permit me to read a few lines from our findings in this article.
Okay.
So we wrote that there is a lack of collaboration between public and private senior high school providers, and such partnership would allow the government to address infrastructure challenges in the free school system by utilizing resources available within the private school. And this is very emphatic statement. So Ghana's 300 private schools with enrollment at approximately 181,000 students are distributed across the 16 regions and operate at a third to half of their classroom capacity. So the point you are trying to make here is that we have 300 private senior high schools. My further readings reveal to me that we also have 699 public senior high schools. Now, if these 300 private senior high schools are put together to the close to 700 public senior high schools, we are going to get 1,000 senior high schools. And if that partnership is going to work, for me, I think it is going to help a lot to address mostly the infrastructure and, if possible, the technological challenges. Because most of these private schools are also pushing themselves to making sure that they produce products or students who are technologically competent.
Okay.
So can I add? Yes. So that's one of the things we have proposed. And in fact, His Excellency the President said, and people asked, how practically was that going to be done? Because private schools are profit making, and if you have free education and you want to partner private schools, how are you going to make that? And so it's one of the issues that is the stakeholder engagement is taking. But you see, like he said, Doc said, if we added the 300 private schools to the 700, we'll be getting about 1,000, which can help us drive away the double track.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, if government were able to construct classrooms, schools to accommodate these people, government will be hiring teachers,
Right.
and pay them. So for me, it's a question of negotiation, and it's encouraging that the private schools themselves have expressed the interest in partnering government in delivering, solving those problems. It's something that I think we need to take forward.
Okay. So when we were talking about the barriers earlier, I mean, although we all mentioned financing, we acknowledge that we should put that aside for now. But at the end of the day, financing is key.
Oh yeah, it's key.
So
it's key.
what kind of financing models are out there that we've looked at that might be helpful as we try to put our arms around this really Herculean effort that your committee and the forum was trying to accomplish?
One of the things I think we need to do is to ensure that monies go where they have to go. And I'm making reference to the GET Fund, for instance. We are aware that it was set up purposely to support education, specifically tertiary education. But now the GET Fund is all over the places.
Yeah.
And it's been capped as well. Portion has been collateralized. Someone said no, it has not been collateralized, that it has been securitized. So, I don't know, yeah. So monies meant for education must go into education. That's one way we can address it. And then ensuring that we remove waste in the system. And my perspective, when you do not apply standards, if you come and say that you do not need to meet a certain quota criteria before you get to secondary school, so even if you are 52, just go through. People come out and they are not able to make it. It becomes financial burden. So monies that should go to support quality will have to be used in accommodation. So it's a question of planning. We need to plan well and ensure that monies for education must go to education.
Yeah. You know, this is something that just came to mind as we were talking. But, you know, we talk a lot about the people who enter these professions. You mentioned earlier emotional intelligence. When we were younger, our teachers were so passionate. You know, and not to say that the teachers today are not passionate, but the question becomes, because there are not a lot of jobs available, do we find ourselves having people go into the profession not necessarily for the passion of it, but because that's where they are able to find a job? And if that is the case, do we need to think about interventions that would really bring them to get the skills that are needed to impart that kind of passion? Because many of us remember our teachers. You mentioned earlier what your teacher did that led you to become who you are now in terms of pursuing education to become a professor. Are we seeing those as challenges, or we don't seem that's not part of the equation at all for discussion?
No, it's a very big challenge. I mean, it used to be there. People think, if I take myself, I never dreamt to become a teacher because I thought teachers didn't have money and others. But through counseling, I decided to go to teacher training college. I went to Enchi College of Education, then teacher training college, and I developed lab. It was through the teacher training college that I was able to write my GCE, O, and A level as a private candidate. And that has been a motivator. We still have now many people who take to teaching as, oh, let me go and do something. So if I get a better place, I move out. And this is one thing that consciously, we should be very intentional on it. At the entry point, this is where those things can be addressed to ensure that we get people who really want to teach. And it also means that we need to do a lot of awareness creation at the school level, in the universities. And when that happens, even though you will get about 3 or 4 people who will still have that mentality, you will get a sizable number of people who will go to colleges of education because they want to. But we've not been intentional about that. All we think about is the exams results. The person has got that and gives
so you mentioned the emotional intelligence and all the things earlier on, that some of the teachers didn't take the time, if you will, or couldn't find the time. Maybe that's a better thing, because when you're doing the double track and those things, it's very difficult to find the time that you need. But you are also with the university college, teaching college. What are you seeing in terms of intake of students? What are you seeing when they leave, and have you made any adjustments to what's going on in Ghana to really make sure that other teachers are leaving, they are serving the purpose of the reality that's out there now?
Yes, for me, if you ask me, I would say that yes, the University of Education Winneba has gone through the stages, or has gone through the years, and they are always making sure that the crop of teachers churned out from that university become that type, or that crop which can help the nation to achieve its educational objectives.
I think this is like a PR for university.
I support him. I support him because, you know, when you have parents,
yes,
the culture that parents actually create informs the behavior of the children. And University of Cape Coast really played a very good role.
Oh my goodness, this is terrible. So between Cape Coast and Winneba, I know. Okay.
But let me see. You see, when we look at the colleges of education, they are doing extremely well. If you look at the course content, if you look at the delivery and all those things, they're doing well. If you look at universities of education, they are doing well, because the training that they all come out with prepares them for a balanced personality. The intellect is developed, the head is developed, the skills in terms of pedagogy they are given, and the heart is also developed. The challenge comes in when they complete, and they have to go through the frustration of being engaged. Someone has been in the house, the person had a certificate, and he wouldn't be recruited. And that is why I like His Excellency, the President's decision to go back to that practice where once you complete the College of Education, you must be given employment straight. You know, whilst we do the professional development, so continuous professional development and all those things. Because that's what I enjoyed, and it was a motivator for
Okay, so let's talk about the faith-based organizations. I mean, I went to Brie Girls, and that's Presbyterian. And, you know, many of these high schools, from Presec to the others, all have some educational faith-based.
We keep complaining of issues of corruption. We keep complaining of issues of corruption, young ones not respecting, indiscipline in schools and all those things. And that's one group. For me, I think that it's now time for us to engage. The conversation must come out how best we can strengthen the partnership between public and then the faith-based institutions, so that we can have the balanced individual to fit the type of adult we want for our nation.
So I read somewhere, and I just Googled this, Haruna Idrisu, the Minister of Education, directs inclusion of ethics and patriotism in preschool curriculum. Because he thought that was an important part of all this. Do you think that would help with this character development that you're talking about?
I think the President had earlier said it when he was talking about the LGBTQ, and said if our curriculum was grounded in values development, we wouldn't have to go to court to determine whether this, because the child would imbibe the values of the society and others. And it's very, very important. When we were young, we have courtesy for schools and
Boys and girls.
Boys and girls.
Like when we're young and he's trying to equate.
Yes, and this does help us to develop patriotism, have feeling for fellow being, irrespective of cultural differences, religious differences. But now, what is it? Even in a school, in the junior secondary school, basic schools, pupils are now getting into groups based on political lines, which is very dangerous for our nation. So we need that. And so if the Honorable Minister said that, I think it's at the right time. And I'm very sure this is one of the things that the stakeholders' engagements will come out with.
Okay, what are your thoughts also? Do you agree with?
Oh yes, I do agree.
Okay, because is that the same as citizenship education?
Well, citizenship education basically deals with patriotism.
Okay.
Actually, knowing your responsibilities and duties. And social studies try to make an integrated approach. But what I realize is that when values are integrated, made part, embedded in subject, depending on who teaches it. Yeah. So I think that we need in our curriculum, we need to be very intentional.
Okay.
So that the Ghanaianness of the Ghanaian
comes
can
through.
be realized.
Yeah. Okay. So let me ask. One of the things the president talked about was the 21st century demands, and he wanted to know what were some of the urgent reforms that would align with our push for this transformation into the 21st century reforms. Let me start with you, Dr. Aqua. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, for me, I'll talk about two. So we need to make sure that we are growing, or we are training the teachers to be what I define as digital citizenship. So they need to make sure that they have their digital competencies. As it is, I was happy when the past government was sharing laptops to the teachers. But the question that came into my mind was, do we even have some of the teachers who know how to use this laptop effectively? Is it not just for watching of movies? Do we have some of the teachers who can go on there, maybe type in an article, want to read to see what is going on? And so, yes, they have the laptops, but I would say that there is the need for the teachers or the government to make sure that some training is given them to help them to become digital citizenship or digital citizens, and not digital migrants. Secondly, I would also recommend that these teachers should read more on soft skills. As a teacher, rightly like Prof says, these values are embedded in soft skills, and one of the soft skills I know is communication. As a teacher, you should have mastery over the way you speak to your students. So you don't speak to kill their spirits, but you rather, as a teacher, you speak to bring up their spirit. Even if they are doing, or even if the answers they are giving are wrong, you help them to be able to get to the right path.
Okay.
And if you don't have that soft skill, which is communication, you cannot get it done.
Okay.
Secondly, another.
Okay. I just wanted to get some of the questions. We'll come back so that we can get some of these things out. So there's one that says from Nana Asare Bidiaku, SDA SHS Aguna Ashanti. Prof, I want to inquire from your guests how their review is going to affect the new SHS curriculum, which has just started implementation at first year. How is Education Strategic Plan 2018 to 2013 contextualized in their review? And finally, is education review in Ghana supposed to be conterminous with change in government? Which kind of?
Oh, I see. Yeah. We cannot tell until we know what is there.
Okay.
And so the stakeholders, especially when it comes to discourses around quality education provision, curriculum issues become very critical. stakeholders will be interrogating the curriculum to find how relevant it is, how feasible it is. So when we analysis come in and the issue of relevance is addressed, issue of feasibility is addressed, issue of expertise to handle them addressed, then obviously continuity will come in. But if, for instance, I was reading and realized that a curriculum in Spanish has been developed. When we don't have teachers trained for that, we don't have colleges trained for that, obviously such type of curriculum cannot last. You see, one of the things that and that's why, in spite of the fact that I'm a chairman of this committee, one of the things I commend His Excellency is the fact that he did not and has not encouraged assembling people who will tell him what he wants to hear. You know, in the past, as I made reference myself, that if you won't tell me what you want, you will never be brought to the table. But he's bringing people differently. And so, objectively, when the analysis is done and find that this curriculum will work well, we have, why not?
Okay. So let's make sure. So one was how would it affect the new SHS curriculum, which just started implementation at first year?
Yeah, so that's what I've responded
How is the Education Strategic Plan 2018 contextualized in their review?
Well, earlier on I said that was one of the things materials were referred to. So the 5 pillars we came on the theme.
We're under that, okay. And this is old major term. Are teachers attending workshops and paying for workshops for points to be able to renew their licenses is disturbing and should not be encouraged by the NDC Education Forum. It's thievery. And this is from Dr. Apia. Demographic pressure in terms of rapid population growth can put pressure on educational institutions, making it challenging to provide quality education fit for sustainable development. We need to integrate population and education policies to create a comprehensive approach that addresses the complex relationship between these two factors, in addition to all the recommendations. Then from Divine Accra, Prof, to what extent are the other political actors involved in the education reforms to ensure it becomes a national agenda/policy that transcends the inevitable changes in government?
Well, the scoping, the mapping we did included political parties.
Okay.
I have not looked at the attendance rate, but at least in Accra, I saw known MPP activists.
That's great.
Yeah, who were there. And so, and that's what I mean by, this one is cross-fertilization of ideas irrespective of where you come from. Yeah. So at the end of the day, we analyze and synthesize and come out.
Yeah, and in all fairness, one would assume that the introduction of the free SHS and whatever happens afterwards will make it better. So really both parties, no matter who you are, once you're a Ghanaian, you really do want to see that whole policy flourish and thrive if possible.
And Prof, and that is why I was listening to one of the stations this afternoon, and a deputy minister was describing this initiative as useless. And I was sad, because when you're talking about policy, manifestos are not policy. We make policies out of manifestos. And for any government that thinks about the nation to implement ideas in manifesto, it is very necessary that the buy-in of the people are sought. And that's exactly what this idea is. So it's never useless. It's a very good thing,
Professor Joe, you are hitting the nail in the right direction from your brother, Dr. Bright Honu. And then from Kondes Beidou, Seshri, Asafo Western North Region. Good evening, Prof. On the free SHS policy, I think the outgoing government led by the ex-president Nana Addo Dankwa must be commended. Regards to all your cherished viewers. And finally from abdujali.com in Sawam. I think we can merge the private SHS by allowing the pupils to select those schools during their registration for the BECE, but those private institutions should not be made completely free, quote unquote, and the parents of the pupils should consent to such selections. So these are the comments that we have. So, but just to ask you the same, maybe I should let you land. You were coming up with another.
Yes.
Yes.
So I was talking about another subcomponent of the soft skills, and another soft skills I think the teachers need to get is leadership skills. One of the things I have read about leadership is that leaders make sure that they are bringing people who become better versions of them. That is, those people they are bringing up will become more than them. And I am very glad that I attended a university and I saw some or most of our lecturers who were so determined to mentor some of us. I always say that I'm coming from a background where, excuse me to say, my parents didn't taste university education. But here am I, by God's grace, I have this PhD. And it is as a result of some motivations and the encouragement and the abilities and other words of inspiration I got from my teachers, who were not just teachers, but were having leadership skills.
Okay. I'm a computing teacher. My concern is teaching computing or digital skills, but our examinations is written, so teachers are bent on teaching it theoretically. So this is just a comment. Two things your panelists said, which is debatable. One, that because of free SHS, graduates of it are not good. I'm not quite sure that's what was said.
We didn't say that.
It seems they do not know much of the new curriculum, and that they seem to suggest teachers of SHS are doing well to handle the SHS students. So, if you're listening, I don't believe that was what any of the panelists said. This is from Emmanuel Lamte, Sakumono Estate. The panelists are only talking about the inclusion of private senior high schools and the education reform. What about the private basic schools? Note that the schools under trees, morning afternoon shift system, and the infrastructural challenges are dominant at the basic school level. The exclusion of private basic schools will render the reform incomplete. And finally, one from Eulalie at Tema. My question, education prepares us to be good and productive citizens. In Ghana, corruption has crept into the very fabric of society. How can we create a consciousness through our education process to achieve the types of citizens we want? So, Prof, can you start, and then Dr. Akwa can.
The last one, can you read?
Sure. Education prepares, well, the question is, how can we, corruption has crept into the very fabric of the society. How can we create a consciousness through our education processes to achieve the types of citizens we want?
Thank you. The first thing I would suggest is colleges of education. The teachers will prepare. The teachers who come out to handle our children. If the mindset is set right at the colleges of education level, then we have hope in our classrooms.
Okay.
If you have, the colleges bring out people who see themselves as Ghanaians, but not as party members, not as religious members in exacting their work, then these things will be imparted to the children. If the teachers who come out are focused on money making and wouldn't want to sacrifice, now the spirit of volunteerism is dying in our society. But it is the teacher who can make the difference.
Wow.
So for me, the colleges of education they have a very great task.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time.
So
I know. So we have to leave it there. But thank
quickly,
you.
Quickly. There's one aspect, language.
Yes.
It's very, very, very critical. Now, we're both saying that, look, teachers must create an enabling environment so that the child can talk critical thinking, creativity. But the notion of the word, so I think Ghanaians, we should start thinking about some of the terminologies we use.
Okay.
When you say instruction, the teacher is an instructor. Why would you turn around to want the teacher to promote that?
Anyway, thank you so much for joining us on tonight's Talking Point. And as always, a very special thank you to my studio guest, Professor George K.T. Oduro, Technical Advisor to the Minister of Education and Chairman of the Education Forum Planning Committee, and Dr. Andrews Akwa, Research Fellow, National Center for Research into Basic Education, University of Education, Winneba. I'm Professor Nimright, and this has been Talking Points. As always, thank you for spending your Sunday with us. Please be and take care. Till next week.